Yo, what's up guys? We're back. We're doing another breakdown and predictions video, and this week it's for UFC 283, big card, return to Brazil. That's one thing I'm pretty hype about, man. We haven't seen the Brazil crowd in a long time. The last Brazil event we had, coincidentally, was actually the first COVID event between Kevin Lee and Charles do Bronx Oliveira, where originally they were going to have a crowd, I believe, and then all of a sudden they had to kind of switch course, and they ended up having no crowd. So it's the first time that we've had a Brazil crowd, and I don't know how long, a long time, and it's kind of unique. It's similar to when they go over to the UK and other things like that, so it's always fun to listen to the Brazil crowd and see the Brazil crowd, especially when there's two titles on the line with two Brazilians in the two main events. So yeah, man, I'm pretty excited for this card. It should be a good one. And just right before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about how our bets went last week on the Patreon and how to sign up for the Patreon. And if you look at it, we did really well last week. We ended up winning over 6 units, 6.43 units. We hit on Sean Strickland, money line play. We hit on the under 2.5 rounds for Charles Johnson versus Jimmy Flick. And then big winners that we had were Ige winning in round 2 and Ige by TKO, which were both big hits for us that gave us the very profitable night. So really good start to the year. And right now I do have a bet for Invicta FC 51, which is coming up on Wednesday. I got 2 bets for UFC 283. So definitely go over there to the Patreon, check it out. Not only do you get all the bets, but you get all my predictions if you just want to use my predictions to make your own bets, and also just get access to different analysis. You get written breakdowns, you get videos, you get a lot of good stuff over there on the Patreon. Get to be part of a cool community over there. So definitely suggest you go over there and check it out. And also helps the channel grow, keep going, and keep making videos for you guys on YouTube. So definitely appreciate everyone on Patreon that's already on there and that's deciding to go on there before the year ends. And throw your hands in the sky right now. Alone. Throw your hands in the sky right now. It's going down.
Unfortunately for the rest of y'all, I'm way better than the best of all. And even though they focus on just the flaws, it's still gonna annihilate the festivals. And we still gonna sip the Dom Perignon, and still gonna eat the filet mignon. And yeah, I've been on to cover up my eyes at the Ravion. Alone flashing lights, the stress of life is way too much to handle in one night. Live this life like it's no tomorrow. Wake up and peers with a Russian motto. Throw your hands in the sky if anybody got $5 in your pocket right now. I call this club Titanic. Why? Cause it's going down.
And right before we get started, the last thing Cashflow MMA, definitely want to check them out right now because they have a free trial going on until the 25th of this month. So if you want to go over there for this week, you will get free access to their bets for the pay-per-view. Check them out and probably make some money. They're some of the best guys in the business. So definitely cashflowmma.com is one of the best ways to go if you want to go over there and make some money. Go to patreon.com/MMAPredictionGuru and make some money, and it's definitely going to be a profitable night for you more often than not. So cashflowmma.com, big shout out to them. Thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for sponsoring the channel, and definitely check them out. But this first fight of the night here between Daniel Marcos and Simon Oliveira, this is going to be a hell of a fight. It's going to be a striking fight, and I think it'll be fun to watch for sure. Both these guys like to really mix it up, and Marcos impressed me in his Contender Series fight. I didn't have a lot of footage on him previous to that, and most of the time what I did see was him grappling more, him trying to get the clinch, getting takedowns, and he had taken a little bit of a layoff before he came on the Contender Series, and when he went into that fight, man, he put on a striking clinic. He was moving really well, he was throwing really nice kicks, he was varying up his attack, counter shots, keeping the range, controlling distance really effectively, and he looked good. He was able to, control the pace of the fight, and he did get a little bit tired towards the end, which in this fight, he maybe has to maintain his cardio a little bit better, but he still was able to maintain his power, which is key. Even in the third round when he was tired, he dropped his opponent, and his leg kicks were on point. He was able to show good takedown defense, and That's the one area where it's kind of iffy with him. I think his striking is pretty on point, but if you look at his cardio and his grappling, those are the question marks. He does seem like he could potentially have some issues with gassing out, and we haven't seen him against great grapplers, great wrestlers, even though it looks like he has serviceable offensive wrestling and serviceable takedown defense. Haven't seen it tested against the right opponents to really make a final verdict. But for Simon Oliveira, Muay Thai guy, I think he is more of a brawler on the feet. He likes to counter with the straight shots, throw a lot of kicks out there, but he is less mobile. He's a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller reach out there, and he is, I think, going to have a little bit of trouble on the feet. I think that Marcos is going to be able to leg kick him and be really effective with the leg kicks. Oliveira is very heavy on that lead leg, and I also think he's just going to be able to land the more shots on the outside with the kicks, whereas Oliveira is more punching based, and I think that the length of Marcos and his ability to control distance and use that lower half is going to have him being a little bit more active and a little bit more effective in the striking realm. And I see Oliveira trying to get the takedowns, and we did see on the Contender Series, Simon Oliveira was able to go in there and be effective, getting his opponent down against a cage, Jose Alde, but I think that Marcos has shown that his takedown defense is pretty solid. He's athletic and good balance. He's going to be hard to get in on in general. And I think as long as he doesn't get tired and get finished in that late second or third round and, potentially get overwhelmed by that Brazilian crowd in his UFC debut. Both these guys are making their UFC debut, so it's a big spot for both of them. And actually, never mind. Oliveira, I'm sorry, he lost in his debut in UFC, but it's going to be their first time, both of them trying to get a win. But yeah, I think that Daniel Marcos is going to be able to get the job done here. I don't trust Oliveira to go out there and wrestle, get takedowns, and he's not much of a submission threat. He actually, in his last fight against Tony Gravely, got taken down quite a bit himself, and he's more of a striker at heart. I think he's going to end up embracing that brawl, and I see Marcos landing some leg kicks that kind of debilitate his movement a little bit, make him a little bit more one-dimensional in terms of only being able to throw big shots and try to goad his opponent into a brawl to win. And I think Marcos can be a little bit too smart for that, and I see him kind of picking Oliveira apart and getting the decision. So the first fight of the night, I'm going to pick the slight upset, go with the underdog, Daniel Marcos, and pick him to win by decision. And this next fight's a bantamweight fight between Luan Lacerda and Cody Stamann. And Luan Lacerda is making his UFC debut, but he's looking to continue the wave of momentum he's on and kind of pronounce himself a player in the UFC right away. He's getting a huge first fight. He's fighting an established top 15 fighter in the world on a pay-per-view card. And he's probably happy to go fast. He's 30 years old, so he definitely needs to move up the rankings quick if he wants to get into these big-time fights. 12-1 in his career overall, and he's won 10 fights in a row. Hasn't lost a fight since 2014. His one loss came against Ari Farias, a jiu-jitsu world champion, a pretty high-level guy outside the UFC. And in Lacerda's 10-fight winning streak, he's finished 9 of his 10 wins by submission. The only thing that's been holding Lacerda back to get into the next level, in my opinion, is his inactivity. He went pro in 2012, and he's only had 12 fights. Since 2018, he's only fought 4 times, so kind of been fighting at a one-time-a-year pace. His last couple fights, he's upped his profile a little bit, fighting in the LFA, and he's obviously going to have the advantage of fighting at home in Brazil in this fight. Cody Stamann, we all know him. He's a fighter who's called UFC home since 2017. Done pretty well, 6-4-1 in 11 fights. A little up and down, but pretty solid. Started his UFC career 5-1-1, but he's gone 1-3 in his last 4 fights, and he did bounce back in his last one. He got a 59-second knockout win over Eddie Wineland, but I think he needs a couple more wins to get him back to where he was before the 3-fight losing streak and kind of differentiate himself from those losses a little bit. But Luan Lacerda is a pretty dangerous fighter. On the feet, he's very long. He's going to have an 8.5-inch reach advantage in this fight. Lacerda, he has a wide stance. He will hand fight with the lead hand, try to maintain distance. His pull two is the main shot he looks for on the feet, along with the check hook. His jab should be a little more active. I think it's not as active as I would like, but overall his hands are okay. Outside of the rear cross, he isn't super polished, but he has good high kicks, good front kicks up the middle. He's fast. And to beat Lacerda, you have to get inside on him. In the pocket, he can float his chin a little bit, get a little uncomfortable, and that's where you can hit him. I've seen him get dropped before, and it's a little tough to get inside because you do have to worry about him clinging on you and pulling guard or getting the takedown. But if you can get in there and work some combinations, get some off, you can get to Lacerda and potentially hurt him. And he's a good grappler, Lacerda. His submission game is pretty top-notch, very aggressive. His wrestling is okay. Sometimes he can shoot doubles fairly well, but primarily he's looking to attack the single, and he'll even pull guard. He's willing to go for flying attacks in the clinch, and he's very fluid in the transitions. On top, he's a beast. On bottom, he's a beast. It doesn't really matter where he's at. Good front chokes, good rear naked chokes. Off his back, he has good slick leg attacks, and in full guard, he'll attack with a lot of submissions. I've seen him get real close on some omoplatas, and he's going to be confident on his back, in my opinion, if Stamann wants to take him down. So we're going to see if Stamann, who's usually a wrestler, is going to want to have to go through that on the ground, or he's going to want to keep it standing and try to beat him that way. But Lacerda's always dangerous. He showed that in his last fight. He was losing, and then in round 2, he pulled guard, attacked the legs, and ended up getting a submission that way. His cardio is a little bit of an unknown. You haven't seen him go long in fights in a while, but he's a veteran, so I think he's going to be on point with the cardio. These smaller guys tend to be pretty good with the cardio most of the time. And Cody Stamann, he's a known commodity at this point. He's improved his stand-up a bit throughout the years and got a knockout win in his last fight, but he's a grinder, short, compact wrestler who wins a majority of his fights through timing takedowns, controlling on top. He uses his quickness on the feet. He'll switch stance, bounce around on the outside, throw some leg kicks, front kicks, side kicks even, and then try to dart in with hooks, duck under, overhands. And he does a good job of disguising his blitzes with fake level changes and landing shots and then using that to set up his takedowns later. But he's hittable. He has real short arms, so on the outside, he doesn't really offer too much. You can land straight punches on him, kicks, if you can control that distance. But his chin is amazing. He has great cardio, so he's willing to pressure, take a lot of damage to try to get inside. Sometimes he doesn't pressure as much as he should, and I think in this fight he has to do it more often than not, or he's going to get in trouble. But his cardio is top-notch, like I said, so he's able to do it if he wants to, and I think if he has the right game plan, he will here. And his wrestling is his best attribute. He's really strong. He has fast level changes. Good job with his footwork of getting fighters to come to him and then timing the takedowns. His top control is okay, not really great. His ability to get multiple takedowns throughout the round is really what wins him fights. He's able to tire guys out and then have his way with them a little bit. But his grappling isn't really elite. His wrestling is more what's very good. His takedown defense is very effective, and I think he'll likely be able to stuff all the takedowns from his opponent. He has to be worried about the guard pulls, and if he does take him down, he has to be very wary of the front chokes and then the full guard, the leg attacks, triangles, arm bars, omoplatas from Lacerda. And Stamann is going to have to decide that, if he wants to keep it standing and try to manage getting past that 8.5-inch reach disadvantage or go for takedowns and fend off the submissions. He's been submitted 2 times in his career already. Both those times that he's been submitted have been against guys with reaches longer than 70 inches. And if you look at Stamann's record, he's fought 3 fighters in the UFC with reaches longer than 70 inches with Terrion Ware, Said Nurmagomedov, and Aljamain Sterling, and he's 1-2 with 2 submission losses there. And Stamann, if he wants to keep it standing, like I said, I think he has to pressure more than normal, be willing to take damage to get his opponent tired, more stationary, and then take over down the stretch. And this is going to be his first fight in Brazil, second fight outside the United States. The first time he didn't get to feel that hostile crowd that he will face at UFC 283 because he fought in front of pretty much no fans. I think it was a little bit of fans in Abu Dhabi, but not that much when he fought on Fight Island. And he lost that fight. He's 0-1 outside the USA so far. So he's going to be looking to earn that feather in his cap of winning in a different country. But I think this is a close fight, honestly. It's a tough matchup for Stamann because Stamann's at a huge reach disadvantage, and Lacerda's submission game is incredible. Usually Stamann is at a reach disadvantage, but he has that ability to take you down and make it null and void, whereas in this fight, I don't know if he's going to want to do that. Stamann does have the benefit of the experience in the UFC and against better fighters, which is big. I think he's going to have to be a lot more aggressive than usual, but man, I wouldn't mess with the grappling against Lacerda unless Stamann gasses him first. On the ground, I think Lacerda has the advantage and could definitely find the submission. And I'm going to take a stab on Lacerda, pick him here. I think he is skilled. He has a big size advantage. He's fighting at home, which could boost him. He is coming to the UFC, which is a little bit sketchy, but maybe it'll give him some, extra boost to go out there and really go for it. And I'm going to say he goes out there and gets a second-round submission win. So I'm going to go with Luan Lacerda to pick up a big upset and be the second upset pick for me on this card. This next fight right here with Josian Nunes and Zara Farn, I don't really have a lot to say on this one. Nunes is a big favorite, and I mean, I just wouldn't want to touch this fight. It's at 145 pounds, and eventually the campaign for Josian Nunes at 145 has to come to an end. She's 5'2", severely undersized for this weight class, and she's going to be a lot smaller than Zara Farn, but I can't in good conscience pick Farn in this fight. She hasn't fought in a long time. She's 36 years old, 0-2 in the UFC, and we haven't really seen her get to use her striking in a while because she's fought two girls that just took her down and out-grappled her pretty easily and finished her in her UFC run so far, so she hasn't gotten a real striking fight, which is what she is in a while, and Josian Nunes is probably going to give her that fight. She's a brawler, comes forward, those big power overhands, big punches, and she's short, compact, very powerful. I think Nunes is going to be able to probably just use her youth and her pressure to get inside and get the knockout here, but Farn is going to have a lot of size, and if she is able to have a good striking performance and use her range, keep that distance, and outstrike her, I wouldn't really be shocked, to be honest. I mean, I don't want anything to do with this fight. I think that Nunes is very small for the weight, and if Farn comes in on point with their striking, she doesn't have the threat of the takedown. I don't really think in this fight she could potentially, surprise some people, but at the end of the day, Nunes is the younger girl. She's been more active. She's gotten wins in the UFC. I've seen her handle this tall striking style against Bea Malecki, and she got the knockout there. I think she's going to attack the body to open up the head eventually, John Lineker style, pressure, and probably get that finish. So I'm going to go with Josian Nunes. I'm going to say she gets a second-round TKO in this fight. And in this next fight, we got two veterans in the welterweight division with Warlley Alves taking on Nicholas Dalby. And Dalby's 38, but he's still hanging around. He's competing well. He's been match made appropriately. He's been fighting some older fighters like himself. And in his last fight, he decisioned the Brazilian Claudio Silva. And overall, Dalby has performed really well against Brazilians. He's 3-0 against them so far in his career. And this is going to be the second time that he's fought in Brazil. He beat Alessio Zaleski dos Santos in Brazil in 2015. And he's fought in many different countries, so he's going to be ready to go. And Warlley Alves, he's coming back after an 18th-month layoff. Performance-wise, Warlley has been super inconsistent, but every time you see his name on a card, there will be violence. So definitely happy anytime I see Warlley Alves is set to compete, comes for war. He hasn't been in decision in his last 6 fights, and he needs to bounce back from a loss. His last fight, he got knocked out pretty brutally against Jeremiah Wells, and this is a big fight for both fighters because I wouldn't be shocked to see the loser part ways with the UFC. Both these fighters are veterans. They're probably getting paid pretty good. And a loss here could make him an expendable asset. But if I'm looking at this fight from a striking perspective, I think Dalby is a lot better. Yes, Warlley early on could potentially blitz him and land some big body kicks or land a big shot and hurt Dalby. But historically, Nicholas Dalby has had a very good chin, and his defense is really on point. I mean, high guard, good eyes, great head movement, and he has sharp counters, good footwork in and out, nice kicks. His cardio is on point, and I just think long-term on the feet, he'll be able to land those cheeky technical shots, whereas Warlley Alves is going to be winging, and I think it goes on. Alves, we've known that he gasses out pretty bad, so he'll get more loopy and more available to hit, and I think Dalby will start hitting on those counters. And Dalby isn't necessarily a big power guy, but I think he'll be able to outstrike Alves long-term and decision him or even get a late finish depending how tired Alves does get. But obviously, in terms of the grappling, Nicholas Dalby is historically been pretty good at mixing it up and getting takedowns and stuff like that. But in this fight, I think he's probably definitely going to want to stay away from that. And his takedown defense has looked a little bit suspect recently. He's historically had good takedown defense, but his last couple fights he's been taken down pretty easily and not really shown the most resistance to the takedowns. And Warlley Alves has to have seen that. He's probably going to try to take him down early right away and beat him up on the ground. And Alves, we all know what his signature is. It's that guillotine. He got Colby Covington with it. He's gotten a lot of guys with it in the UFC. But recently, since he kind of had that string of guillotine too, I kind of found it out, and he hasn't been catching guys in it quite as often. So Dalby never been submitted in his career. I guess technically he did get submitted after he got rocked against Jesse Ronson, but That fight ended up being a no contest due to Ronson failing to post-fight drug test. But Dalby overall has never been finished. So that's something that you really have to take into account. 25 fights, he's never been taken out. And I know that they're in Brazil in this one, so that could potentially, swing the fight towards Alves. But I think that Nicholas Dalby is going to be able to outlast him here. I think he's a guy that, like I said, has never been finished. He's going to be tough to get out of there early for Alves, who likes to go out there, blitz, and get those early finishes. I think long-term on the feet, Nicholas Dalby has the advantage, and I think he can start to control that range. It's a little bit longer, and I think he has those longer range weapons that he uses more effectively. And I also believe that his wrestling is good enough to stop the takedowns from Alves, especially with Alves not necessarily being a wrestler. He doesn't really go for a lot of takedowns, especially in multiple rounds in fights, and I don't think he could maintain that pace with the wrestling unless he's worked on himself quite a bit to get a lot better. And he is 32, so he hasn't fought in a while. Maybe he will finally come back and look improved, but he's been in the UFC for a long time. He's had the skills and kind of has maintained and stayed that same level, maybe even regressed a little bit. So I don't necessarily have that trust in Alves to say that he's gone out there and made the requisite adjustments to improve his game. And because of that, I'm going to go with Dalby here, and I'm going to say he wins via decision. And this next fight here, this is a tough one for me, man. Terrance McKinney versus Ismael Bonfim. And this is the first of Bonfim brothers that's going to be fighting on this card. And obviously, Terrance McKinney is a pretty big deal. He jumped onto the scene, big on social media, flashy finisher, fastest debut in UFC history, fastest knockout finish. And one of these prospects are going to have to go down a peg. I mean, we saw Terrance McKinney get really close to getting over that hump. He probably would have been in against top 15 competition if he was able to take out Drew Dober on short notice when he had that opportunity. He almost knocked him out, but got tired. Dober ended up getting him out of there. And for Bonfim, this is his UFC debut, but I believe that he's experienced 21 fights. He's on a win streak right now, won 12 in a row. And if he wins this fight, I wouldn't be shocked to see him in there against a fairly big name for his next one. But Bonfim, I mean, he is a guy that's a striker, pressure fighter, good boxing. Jab is on point, good check hook, big overhand, solid uppercuts. He lands a lot of body punches, and that's going to be potentially a big factor in this fight against the explosive fighter in McKinney that gets tired. And Bonfim sometimes isn't the most technical with his hands, though. He'll wing big punches, but he does have power. He isn't really a big kicker. Sometimes he'll mix in some leg kicks and body kicks, and he is down to brawl. He's flat-footed, and he has a good high guard, decent eyes, good defense, but he's going to have to be smart, especially early, and avoid that power of McKinney. But in terms of the wrestling and the grappling, I haven't seen too much grappling from Bonfim. It doesn't seem like he is the best wrestling to me, and I definitely think Terrance McKinney should look to wrestle here and see if he can get him down and get the back and get that rear naked choke. We have seen Bonfim get submitted in the past by rear naked choke against Renato Moicano, and his cardio is going to be a weapon in this fight. For Bonfim, he's going to want to try to defend the takedowns, keep it standing, pressure, attack the body, and try to break McKinney. And we've seen McKinney in the past where if he can't get it done early, he tends to kind of fade away. But if Bonfim gets taken down early, gets his back up, Terrance McKinney is a really good guy with the submissions, with the rear naked chokes, and could see him having an early night again potentially. But yeah, I mean, he definitely has to be ready to go 3 rounds though. Terrance McKinney, because a Brazilian is not going to want to get tapped out in Brazil against an American, so it's going to be a battle. But Terrance McKinney on the feet, he is good. I mean, he's very explosive, super powerful. He'll throw a lot of flashy kicks, flying knees, good crosses. He has a lot of speed, but he's very wide, open to being hit, kind of wild. And long term, I don't think he can compete on the feet with Bonfim, especially once that explosiveness and speed starts to go down just even a tad. And I think he has to wrestle here and be in shape to wrestle for 3 rounds, but hopefully only have to wrestle for 1, get the back, and get that rear naked choke. But if he can't go out there and keep the pace, then he could be in trouble. And man, it's a tough one for me. Is like I said, I haven't seen too much of Bonfim's wrestling, but I feel like McKinney could exploit it, and if he comes in good shape, could just out wrestle him for 3 rounds or even get that first round submission. So I'm more leaning towards Terrance McKinney. I not like a huge guy. I know some people are really, big on McKinney. I think he could be a future champ and all that. I'm not necessarily in that camp, but I think for this one, McKinney could use his wrestling to get the win. I know that Gabriel Bonfim is a really good grappler, so maybe, I'm missing something with Ismail and you'll be able to out-grapple Terrance McKinney. But for now, I'm going to say McKinney uses his wrestling, and I'll say he gets the first-round submission, but hopefully he's in shape to get the decision too, because he might have to do it. But I'm going to go with Terrance McKinney. I'm going to say Terrance McKinney uses his wrestling to get the win here. And with this next fight, I don't really think there's much to say here. Jailton Almeida, gigantic favorite here against Shamil Abdurakhimov. And I don't really know what the UFC's plan is with Almeida. I mean, I thought by now they would have given him a step up in competition. I don't really get why they're having him fight Abdurakhimov here. He's crushed everyone that he's fought, and I feel like would have been more entertaining to get him in there against a top 10, top 15 opponent at heavyweight or light heavyweight. But they obviously like him, and they want him to keep winning, I guess. And Shamil Abdurakhimov, he 41 years old, coming off 3 knockout losses in a row. We saw how he performed against Curtis Blades, where his wrestling just didn't seem up to par. And I'm not saying that Almeida has good wrestling as Curtis Blades. He's not as big and definitely not as polished as a wrestler, but I don't think he's going to have problems with taking Abdurakhimov down, and we've seen him have no issues with really anybody on the ground so far, so I think he'll probably be able to find that finish in the first round, but everything on this fight's juiced. I mean, the under 1.5, Almeida by submission, so I just don't really have a lot to say about this fight. I feel like Shamil Abdurakhimov is the value side because these are heavyweights, and anything could happen. He could land a big punch. We haven't really seen Almeida have to work on the feet too much, but I can't pick Abdurakhimov, so I'm going to say Almeida wins by first-round submission. And this next one, Gabriel Bonfim taking on Mounir Lazzez. And Gabriel Bonfim, obviously the second of the Bonfim brothers on this card, 13-0. He's the undefeated younger brother, taking on a tough challenge in Mounir Lazzez, who's getting up there in age, 35, but has fared well in the UFC, only has 1 loss, and has had some really good performances against some established guys. And he has an interesting skill set as well. But Bonfim, he's a fighter that's pretty similar to his brother. Good boxing, nice jab. He does a good job of using his power, check hooks. He stands tall, throws fast hands, fast 1-2s, big power overhands. He really likes to get in that pocket and pull counter. And I think he's a little bit slicker with his pull counters than his brother, but he doesn't do as good a job attacking the body. He's mainly just a headhunter. And he is pretty slick, though, but I think that he is going to struggle against guys that have very good movement, that can leg kick and counter, because he is more a guy that wants to sit in the pocket with you. But he is pretty good at being patient, not really overextending or getting outside of himself, walking you down, cutting the cage off. He'll switch stances, cut the cage off, and if he gets frustrated and starts to let Lazzez style on him by chasing him, then he could be in trouble. But if he stays how he usually does with a good fight IQ, he'll probably be able to cut him off and start to beat him up. And most of his victories are by submission, and I've seen him, hit some takedowns, but sometimes I've also seen fighters shooting on him and him reverse and submit them. So he's good at making guys shooting on him with his pressure and his boxing, and he also will make some takedowns when he has to. And he's good on top. He has a nice arm triangle, good rear naked choke. His submissions off his back are decent. Good front chokes as well. But I don't really necessarily know how high level his wrestling is. I haven't seen him in there against good wrestlers, and I don't really know enough. But I feel as if against Lazzez, he's going to be the superior grappler. And with Mounir Lazzez, I mean, he has the tools to win this fight, but most of the time he doesn't fight in the way that I think he would need to win here. Mounir Lazzez is a guy that lets all the weapons go. He'll throw elbows, he'll throw knees, he'll throw a lot of kicks, he'll throw spinning attacks, he'll throw nice punches, combinations. But the issue with Mounir Lazzez is he likes to brawl, man. You get flat-footed, he likes to exchange, and he uses his range pretty good, and he could pull counter, land some nice elbows, and be effective in that manner. But he's also hittable, and I think Bonfim is just a little tighter with the defense, and I think Mounir Lazzez is going to play into his game and sit in the pocket with him. If Mounir Lazzez wins this fight, I think it'll be with him using his movement, using his reach advantage, moving laterally side to side, working the leg kicks, trying to control distance with counterattacks, and landing maybe 1-2 shots and getting out of range, not getting stuck in and brawling and things like that. And I also think that Mounir Lazzez, his grappling, I don't really trust it 100%, so I think that if Bonfim gets a takedown, he could submit him, and I think that Bonfim could potentially get a takedown or two here against Lazzez. So Ultimately, I'm going to say he rocks Lazzez and then submits him, so I am leaning towards the Bonfim side. And I just don't think Lazzez at 35 years old is going to go in there and move around and be able to maintain that cardio and do something that he usually doesn't do to get the win. I think he's going to get stuck in there and try to brawl, and there's potential that Lazzez lands the bigger shots and gets Bonfim out of there, who's has a little bit of a reckless style, wanting to exchange in the pocket. But I think if Bonfim gets him to brawl, he'll probably be able to either hurt him or open up the takedown. And then once it gets to the ground, I think he'll have the advantage there. And that's where I think Bonfim's going to get the finish. So give me Gabriel Bonfim in this fight to get the victory inside the distance via second round submission. This next fight, we got the LFA champ, Melquizael Costa, is taking on Thiago Moises. And for Costa, he's an athletic striker, aggressive, pressures forward, good kicks, fast front kicks to the body, round kicks, spinning kicks. He isn't really a good boxer, but he's explosive. He'll close the distance. He'll throw some 1-2s, 2-3s. He has a good left hook. And he tends to be very fast, aggressive in round one and then slow down a little bit as the fight goes on. He doesn't gas out, but he just drops in volume. And defensively, he's pretty hittable. He's tough. He's never been finished by strikes, but I think that Moises is a little more polished on the feet. I think he has the footwork edge. And we have seen Moises crumble before against strikers who pressure are fast and keep it long. But I think he'll be able to counterpunch to set up the takedowns in this fight as long as he fights smart. And I think he's a little bit superior and further along in his career than Costa, who likes to brawl quite a bit and is not a great boxer. He throws a lot of kicks. And Costa's grappling has improved, but his wrestling is below average, and he doesn't really have offensive wrestling to speak of. Off his back, I feel like he's not the greatest. He'll try to explode back up, but if you can rebuff that, you can usually hold him down, and he did get submitted in one of his losses. Sometimes you can reverse takedowns and get on top, and he's okay from the top position. He submitted some lesser opposition, but his grappling, I think, is far inferior to Thiago Moises's. His cardio was good. That's where I think he does have the advantage. But I think Moises is an explosive guy. He's going to counter with some nice crosses, some knees. He might land that head kick that he likes to use, counter check hook. And I think he'll be able to use that and use Costa's aggressiveness to get him down to the ground. And I feel like Moises will show up and get it done. I'm going to pick him by first round submission in this one. I'm just going to say all that experience he's accrued. He's been in a 5-round main event. He's fought the champ, for God's sake. And I think he dominated Crystal Chagres in the last fight, who's no bum. So hopefully he can build off that and have another dominant victory. He's been inconsistent, so he's not really someone that I'm interested in betting, or I'm not really interested in this fight from that point of view, from the betting-wise. But I'm going to say that Moises goes out there and shows he's just a step ahead of this young guy. Even though they're around the same age, just young in his career. And Moises by submission in the first round is going to be my prediction. And this next one, we got Gregory Rodrigues versus Brunno Ferreira. Another fight where it's an established fighter taking on a UFC debutant. And Gregory Rodrigues, he's turned himself into a fan favorite, man. I mean, he's put on some wars in the octagon. 5 fights so far, 4-1 in those 5 fights. His one loss was a split, so he easily could be undefeated. And his last 2 fights, he's gotten vicious knockouts. He's gotten close to getting knocked out in 2 of his last few fights as well, when he fought Jungyoung Park and Chidi Njokuani, and he came back and turned the tables and got the win in that one. And he can't have a letdown spot here because he was expecting to fight a big test in Brad Tavares, but Tavares pulled out. Now he's getting a fellow Brazilian in Brunno Ferreira, who's 9-0. And Brunno Ferreira, he's had a super quick rise so far in his career. His pro debut was less than 4 years ago in April of 2019. He's won all 9 of his fights by finish. Never been outside of the second round. 7 of his finishes that came in the first, so just ran through the majority of his opponents. And he hasn't fought anyone of Gregory Rodrigues' caliber, but you know he's going to be confident. He's undefeated, young. He's run through everyone that he's fought so far. And his style for Brunno Ferreira, he's short, compact guy. Very impressive. They call him the Hulk for a reason. He's incredibly strong. He's explosive. On the feet, he moves in and out well. He controls distance. He's light on his feet. He's fast. He could switch stance. He'll throw some nice kicks on the outside, then come with the power overhands. Sometimes he can get a little sloppy, and I don't think his striking is really that polished. But, you know, he's very explosive, and he has power, so it makes him dangerous. But fighters who can maintain distance, be patient, they could probably snipe and land clean punches on Ferreira. Haven't really seen Ferreira hit with heavy shots where I can judge his chin or toughness or anything like that. but he finishes most of his fights on the ground. Ferreira is really good at closing the gap quickly, getting into the clinch, and from there he can really manhandle guys, elevate, land big slams, and when he gets on top, he's very good with his passing ability. I've seen him lose position a couple times when he's gotten in a mount, which I think against Rodrigues, if he can't hold the mount against those inferior guys, then I think against Rodrigues, he's really not going to be able to maintain position on the ground in those type of positions. But Ferreira can really be effective with the ground and pound. That's where he shines. He has one-punch power, super blunt punching power, and if he can land 2, 3, 4 ground and pound strikes in a row, he could end the fight or change the fight. So far his opposition level has only been regional scene level. So we haven't really seen him face adversity or be in there with someone as polished as Rodrigues, but definitely has been an impressive fighter. And Gregory Rodrigues, his stand-up has gotten a lot better under Henry Hooft, and he is patient. He throws leg kicks, counter punches, good jab, feints a lot. His straight right hand is fast, powerful, big overhands, good check hook, and all I would do is just wouldn't brawl with Ferreira because Rodrigues does have the propensity to stick in and go to war, and he's gotten hurt in a couple fights. He's gotten knocked out in the past, so that would be a dumb strategy, especially early against Ferreira. Needs to keep it technical, show his experience, and on the ground he's a Jiu-Jitsu world champion, very active. His wrestling has improved, even though he mainly prefers to strike in recent fights. He will push fighters against the cage, work takedowns, and on top he's good with his back takes, good control, and very active off his back. I feel like that's going to be the difference between him and a lot of Ferreira's previous opponents, is his ability to stay safe and get up off bottom and also be offensive off bottom with submissions. And Rodrigues' cardio is top notch. He weaponizes that. He pushes the pace. He's going to have a big experience edge in this fight. And I have to go with RoboCop. Even though Ferreira is an impressive prospect, I would target the under as opposed to a side here. And I would probably go with Rodrigues by first round knockout. Ferreira early on is going to have a chance to land that left hook or a big overhand and end the fight, but I think Rodrigues is much cleaner overall in the striking. He has the reach and height advantage, and he's going to likely be able to get ahead with the kicks, the leg kicks primarily, the jab, the straight shots, and he's shown big power recently, so I think he's going to be able to find that knockout. I think Ferreira is a little bit open with the striking. He just hasn't been exploited yet, and I'm going to say he gets him out of there in the late first. Even if Rodrigues gets taken down, I think that'll be Ferreira's best chance to win by landing some big ground and pound, but Rodrigues knows how to handle himself, and I'm going to trust in his jiu-jitsu to get back up to his feet if he ends up in a bad spot. So give me Gregory Rodrigues. I'm going to say he wins by first round knockout, and I think him winning inside the distance is a pretty good proposition. And this next fight, this is a great fight just because we have the end of a career of a legend with Shogun Rua. Outside of that, it's maybe not the highest level fight, but you have to give this guy props. He's one of the first fighters that he was one of these young guns, man, like a John Jones that came up after him or someone like that. I guess Vitor came before him, but he was like 18, 19 in those Pride tournaments, went out there, got the big upset victory, and then ended up having some of the most just violent finishes in MMA history over there. Came to the UFC, became the champ, and has had some of the best wars in UFC history, like his fights with Dan Henderson. And 41 years old, he's still out there, doing fairly well. Even though he lost his last fight against OSP, he was in the fight. It was a pretty competitive fight that could have won either way, to be honest with you. And now he's getting a swan song. He's in Brazil. He couldn't ask for a better opportunity. And to be honest, I mean, the opponent that he's getting is a winnable opponent. So it's all, good for Shogun pre-fight. And Ihor Potieria, I mean, this is a crazy spot for him. I'm sure that he's watched Shogun growing up. I'm sure he knows who he is. And he's a guy that doesn't really have a lot of experience against really anyone of note. I mean, he's never fought a guy ranked in the top 30, I don't think. I don't know where Nikolai Negumereanu is ranked at. But outside of that, if you look at the fighters he fought in the regional scene, it's a lot of, junk, man. I mean, he has a real padded record. It's a real strange record, too. I mean, the guy looks like should be a pretty good finisher just from his build and some of the explosive finishes that he does get in certain fights, but he's going to decisions with the 0-0 guys, with 42-year-old guys with 17 and 18 records, or he's losing or going to split decision with fighters that are 11 and 19, so he has some, kind of bad red flags on his record, and in his UFC debut, he didn't perform very well either. But obviously with Shogun Rua, we got a fighter with a lot of mileage, over 40 fights. He's 41 years old, taking a ton of damage, definitely is showing the wear and tear in his recent fights. So it's a real hard one to predict, man. I feel like it should be more of a pick'em line. I don't really think you should trust Potieria at minus 200. Maybe give him the slight edge just because of the youth. But I'm not a really big fan of Potieria's style, man. I mean, the guy's a wild striker, very open, very hittable. He is tall, he's explosive, he looks fairly powerful when he lands, but no real kind of rhyme or reason to his striking. He'll real close the distance and jam himself up, give up easy takedowns. His defense is horrible, and he really kind of holds his hands down and tries to goad fighters to throw at him and then explode with the counters. So he could sometimes be inactive as well if guys just don't throw much. And Shogun, he's not going to fall into any of that BS. Even though he's older and he might not have the same skill set or athleticism that he had in the past, he's not going to get goaded in by a guy taunting him and things like that. He's going to maintain his cool and fight smart, and he still hits hard. So Potieria having that horrible defense and taking a lot of damage. I mean, he showed a great chin, not getting knocked out against Nico Mariano. I mean, knocked out stiff because he took a lot of damage, but he did get TKO'd. And Shogun, if he lands a clean shot, he still has that power, but I think that's pretty unlikely. I think if Shogun wins, it's going to be through pinning him against the cage and trying to take him down. And another thing is Shogun is going to maintain that cardio. He's going to be the more composed fighter. This crowd is going to be going nuts. Potieria, I don't think he's ever experienced anything like he's going to experience on this Saturday night. And I don't know. I mean, maybe Potieria will go out there and catch Shogun early and knock him out. It's very possible, but just looking at his record, him, going to decisions with 0-0 guys and older guys as well, not really performing as good or very good at all, in my opinion. I feel like Shogun could win this fight, so this is a fight I would stay far away from betting-wise. I'm not really interested in it, but I'm going to actually pick Shogun to win this fight by decision. And I think he's going to use his cage grinding. He's going to get some takedowns, and I think Potieria is really going to get very tired, and it's going to turn into a super sloppy fight. And I'm going to go with Shogun. I think if it's anywhere even close at all, then Shogun's going to get the nod too. That's another thing that I haven't talked about so far in this video, but it is something that you have to really think about when you're predicting these fights. If it's close, you got to kind of lean towards the Brazilian just with the crowd, with the hometown advantage, potentially with the judges. So I think that I'm going to go with Shogun by decision in this one, but yeah, I don't want to have anything to do with this fight. And this next fight kicking off the main card, I'm definitely excited to watch this fight, but I can't really have a confident prediction. It's hard to really even give a competent breakdown on who I'm leaning on in this fight because both these guys, very, very hard guys to trust. They're fighters that tend to rely on explosive finishes to get the job done. I guess Paul Craig, you maybe wouldn't say they're explosive finishes, but he relies on finishes nonetheless. And Paul Craig, he's a fighter, jiu-jitsu fighter, pretty one-dimensional specialist. His striking is improved. I mean, you'll throw some 1-2, some kicks, and he'll let his shots go. He's improved at the speed a little bit and is not a horrible striker, but I don't think he could contend with Walker on the feet. We've seen him struggle quite a bit with fighters that are explosive, that are long, that are big, that have knockout power, and he's been knocked out early in some fights. And Johnny Walker is known for early knockouts. His defense is really bad. He doesn't have a great chin either, but he's very explosive, and if he can land a flying knee, an elbow, land a big counter inside, then he could definitely knock you out. And I think that he's getting more confident in his grappling. We saw him defensive takedowns and actually end up getting a submission against Iwan Kudalaba, which was fairly impressive. So I think he's going to continue that trend here and be able to be the superior wrestler in this fight ultimately. And I think that he's going to probably be able to keep it standing and knock Paul Craig out in that first round. So that's what I'm going to go with. He's going to be at home in Brazil. He's one of these guys that I think could potentially be affected and pumped up by the crowd to do better. So I think Paul Craig, too one-dimensional. He had his run. And, a guy like Johnny Walker is very beatable because you can land a clean shot on the chin and he usually doesn't take him very well. And you could also potentially get him to the ground and catch him in a submission. So Paul Craig's always live in every fight he's in, and definitely he's live in this one. But I'm going to go with Johnny Walker via first-round finish, and I'm not overly bullish on that pick, but I got to pick someone, and I'm going to go with Johnny Walker by first-round KO. And this next fight, we got two of the best girls in the world at 125 pounds with Jessica Andrade taking on Lauren Murphy. And Andrade has been bouncing up and down between 115 and 125. Her last fight, she got that big win over Amanda Lemos, first ever standing arm triangle in UFC history. And she beat a girl that's ranked pretty highly. And Lauren Murphy, she fought for the belt. She lost that fight, ended up coming back in a big win in a bounce-back way, which was a very good performance to see her come back and do well, especially with her being 39 years old. You never know when it's kind of going to have the wheels fall off for her. But this fight, man, I think it's a real tough matchup for Lauren Murphy. With Murphy, we got a big girl for the weight that wants to kind of maul you, use the pressure. Her striking is okay. She's a decent jab, and she'll throw that straight, but she doesn't have even close to the speed, explosiveness, or power that Andrade has, which is some of the best in WMA history. I think on the feet, Lauren Murphy is severely outmatched, and I think Andrade could knock her out, even though Murphy is historically extremely durable. And the one area where you could maybe give Lauren Murphy a slight edge is the wrestling. She maybe could get in there and take Andrade down, but I don't really see it, man. I don't think that she has that explosiveness. I think Andrade's going to see her takedowns coming. You'd be able to use the strength to deny them, and her technique is improving. She's in Vegas now instead of out in Brazil training, which she's getting more specialized training in the wrestling and different things like that. And I just think that Andrade's too much of a beast, man. I see her getting the finish in this one. I'm going to say she gets the TKO in round 2. I think she's going to maybe hurt her to the body, Lauren Murphy, and then finish her. And I just don't think Murphy's going to get much going. I don't think she's going to be competitive on the feet. I think that Andrade is going to be too fast, too explosive, too powerful, and I don't think she's going to be able to get the takedown. So I'm going to go with Andrade inside the distance, second round. And this next fight's between two vets, two established top 10 guys at 170 pounds here with Gilbert Burns and Neil Magny. Neil Magny has the most wins ever at welterweight. He's a guy that's been around forever in the UFC, but unfortunately for him, I feel like he's kind of on the back nine, man. He's looking like he's a little bit on the way down. He did get a win in his last fight, but I didn't really think it was the greatest performance against Daniel Rodrigues, and he did grit it out at the end, but very tough fight. He got the submission in the third round. Even before that, when he fought Max Griffin in another victory of his in 2022, split decision, could have won either way. And when he faced a little bit higher level competition with Shavkat Rakhmonov last year, he got submitted, got dominated. And Gilbert Burns, he hasn't fought since that epic fight with Khamzat Chimaev. But at welterweight, he's really mowed through everyone except for the champ, Kamaru Usman, and Chimaev, who he had a back-and-forth war with, which was a very close fight. And now he's getting back into it. He's been asking for a fight for a long time. And it's pretty weird. I mean, you would think that Neil Magny is the older guy in this matchup, but it's actually Gilbert Burns. But mileage-wise and just how they're performing in the cage, I think Gilbert Burns fights and looks a lot younger in that octagon. More explosive, faster, stronger. And one of the main type of fighters that Neil Magny has had big issues with in his career are short, compact grapplers that are superior to him in that realm. He's been submitted in multiple fights, and I think Gilbert Burns, if he's smart, he's just going to use his explosiveness to get inside, get the takedowns, which Neil Magny's takedown defense has not been looking that great recently. And if he can get on top, I think he could dominate him and get the finish there. So I think on the feet, Burns is more explosive. It could land the power shots as well, but he's going to be a lot smaller. And Magny has a way of using that reach and the double, triple jabs to control distance, land those twos, get you backed up, clinch you, and start to get you tired with this pressure. So I think that if Burns fights smart and works those takedowns, he can get him to the ground and really take advantage of him. I also think Magny's chin is a little bit going. He's historically been a very durable guy, but he's been getting hurt in recent fights, and I think that Burns is one of the heavier hitters in the weight class. Very nice check hook, and if Magny is a little bit lazy with one of those jabs or comes in a little bit ugly with the striking, I think Gilbert Burns could potentially find that shot and knock him out. So I think Burns is better everywhere, and I think the easiest path to victory would be to get the takedown and get the submission. Burns isn't really a guy that's gotten a lot of submissions in MMA, but I think that it's definitely viable for him to get one in this fight. I think he's vastly superior on the ground, and we've seen Magny struggle and get submitted against better grapplers. So that's kind of what I think is going to happen. I'm going to say Magny survives a rough first round and gets submitted in the second. So give me Gilbert Neil Burns, and I'm pretty confident in this one. I think he definitely is going to get the job done over Magny. I think it's fading a little bit in the division. And up next year, we'll have a fight that's making history. Not only is it a title fight, it's two of the best fighters in the world. They're at 125 pounds. They're going to be throwing down, but It's the first time in UFC history where fighters are going to be facing off for the fourth time in a row, and that's Deiveson Figueiredo taking on Brandon Moreno. And I kind of have mixed feelings about this fight. Obviously, every time they fight, it's produced fireworks. It's been really, really fun fights to watch, and it probably is going to happen again. But I wish Deiveson Figueiredo, who's a little bit older, 35 now, would have gotten to fight some other guys as the champ and potentially had some different fights. Like, it sucks for fighters like Alejandro Pantoja, who has 2 wins over Brandon Moreno, that's just been beating guys and just kind of been shut out of that title picture, and some other fighters as well. But I do think these are the 2 best guys in the weight, and we're going to see what happens for the 4th time. Figueiredo, he got a little bit unlucky that first fight with the point taken, and he could have been kind of done with Moreno at that point, but that draw turned this quadrility into a possibility, because then Moreno went out there, did what he did in the second fight, got the finish. And I do believe that Figueiredo was not really himself that night with the weight cut, because besides that fight, all the other fights have been extremely competitive, and in that one he just did not look like himself there. And then the third one, very close fight, and Figueiredo was able to edge it with the big moments. He got 4 knockdowns, even though Moreno threw a lot more volume and was probably more effective and won more minutes of the fight. Figueiredo's big moments ended up edging it on the judges' scorecards. And now it's going to be the final time that they face off, potentially. And, you know, it could not be. I mean, if Brandon Moreno wins, are they going to do the 5th one? I don't know. But, you know, with this fight, I do think one of the main factors is age, man. Deiveson Figueiredo is 35 years old. Now, he hasn't fought in over a year. Moreno was able to go in there and beat Kai Kara France for the interim title and stay active. So I kind of think Moreno is going to be a little bit more in form. And with Figueiredo, one of the main things that you always have to think about even before the fight is you have to watch that weight cut, man, see how he looks and see how he's acting, because if he had a rough weight cut, we saw how that could affect him in the second fight, and it's pretty significant. He's one of the bigger flyweights on the roster. His last fight, it looked like he made weight pretty easily, and he performed good. So it's just what you think he looks like on the scale on weight day. But the way both these guys fight, I mean, we've seen it happen multiple times now, and it's Figueiredo. He likes to pressure. He's feigning a lot. He's looking to use the jab to set up, you know, those counter check hooks or the counter straight right hand, straight left hand. He does switch stances quite a bit, and he'll rip the body to come up to the head. He likes to land that jab, then pull counter with, you know, 3, 4, 5 punch combinations, and he has the speed to do it. And Moreno's gotten a little bit hip to that, so he's not really playing that counter game with them. He's trying to stay long as well and find his opportunities to land the shots. And I feel like Moreno is the more durable fighter. Even though he got dropped quite a few times in his last fight, he would bounce right back up and get in Figueiredo's face. And when they got in those brawls, it would be Moreno that would kind of back Figueiredo off a little bit. And I do think Figueiredo, he doesn't have even nearly close to the amount of offense and volume that Moreno brings. Moreno throws a lot of kicks on the outside. He's a lot more active with the hands. He throws more combos. I think he's a little bit better in the exchanges too, but the thing is just Figueiredo has that equalizer with the power. In his last fight, even though I feel like Moreno was the better fighter on the night, the knockdowns won Figueiredo the fight, and that's what he's going to be looking for here. He's going to be looking for those big shots, and Moreno just has to be a little bit more defensively responsible. Sometimes he holds his hands low, and I think that, you know, James Krause isn't in his corner anymore, but with James Krause as his coach before, when he went to the Kai Kara fight, he was holding his hands a lot higher, and he was being more defensively responsible, and I think that's going to help him in the Figueiredo fight if he does come with that same game plan. And the grappling, I mean, Moreno, I think, is probably a little bit better wrestler, but both guys have shown they could take each other down, but neither guy has really shown they could hold each other down outside of that second fight where Moreno ended up getting that rear naked choke. The last fight, Figueiredo was able to make the adjustment and get right back up to his feet when he was taken down, and Moreno, he got taken down a couple times too and controlled a little bit longer, but he was also able to get back up to his feet fairly quickly. Cardio-wise, I think it's a huge edge for Moreno, and he usually wins that 4th and 5th round. And I got to edge it towards Brandon Moreno. I just think the youth, the cardio, the volume, I think Figueiredo's relying on those big moments to win the fight. And if he doesn't land those knockdowns and Moreno's just a little bit more defensively responsible, he'll be able to get ahead on the numbers and win the fight. So I think that a lot of things are in factor. You know, the fact that Figueiredo hasn't fought in over a year. He's a little bit older. Moreno, I think, is still improving. I think that he is a little bit more durable. I think he has the cardio advantage. They've seen each other so often, so I think that Moreno is confident that he could take the power of Figueiredo, and that aura of Figueiredo is a little bit erased, whereas against other fighters, he could have him a little bit scared, I believe. And I'm going to go with Moreno to win this fight via decision. I think it'll be competitive again, but I think Moreno will make it pretty clear this time that he did earn the victory. And I'm going to go with him to be and new champ, and we'll see what happens next. So I'm going to go with Brandon the Assassin, Baby Moreno, to become the new champ for the second time and get the undisputed title now. And finally, we're closing it out with a banger at 205 for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship in the main event. It's Glover Teixeira taking on Jamahal Hill. Glover Teixeira, the former champ, and he was going to be getting an opportunity to get revenge on Yuri Prochazka and get his belt back last year, and we all know the fiasco that happened there with Prochazka vacating his belt, Glover Teixeira getting taken off the card, and then Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz fighting to a draw, which led to them, putting the belt on the line for this fight a little bit later, and against a completely different guy with Jamahal Hill. And I feel like it's a better matchup probably than Magomed Ankalaev for Glover Teixeira, but it's a good one because, to be honest, Glover Teixeira, I believe, was probably expecting Magomed Ankalaev to win that fight, and they did ask him to fight Magomed Ankalaev at first, and he was a little bit trepidatious due to the southpaw style, but I believe he was probably getting ready for a southpaw due to that, and that's what Jamahal Hill is, so that's something that's pretty good for Glover, I believe. And it's a very interesting fight because Jamahal Hill's only had about 6 weeks, and usually that's enough for a fight, but when it's 5 rounds, when it's a UFC title fight, you probably want a little bit more than 6 weeks notice, especially when you're fighting a guy that's a very bad matchup for you on paper, which Glover is for Jamahal Hill. And the main thing that people are seeing and why I think Jamahal Hill's the favorite and why I think a lot of people are picking Jamahal Hill, and rightfully so, is the youth and the momentum. The guy's on a 3-fight win streak. He's been knocking fools out, and I love Jamahal Hill. If you watch the channel, this fight, this light heavyweight title fight's a little bit bittersweet for me because both these guys are guys that I really root for and I bet on in the past, and they've been good for me. So, with this fight, it's two of the guys that I like to pick, but I think Jamahal Hill, like I said, he has the advantages with the momentum, being 12 years younger than his opponent, but he also has some disadvantages. He's never fought in Brazil. He's never fought outside the United States, I don't believe, and he, is going to be in there in a title fight against a real established guy, and he's been fighting some good fighters like the Thiago Santoses. He fought Johnny Walker, he fought Jimmy Crute, Paul Craig, but we can't say that those fighters are necessarily on the same level as a Glover Teixeira. I think Glover definitely clears those guys. And when you're looking at it from a matchup perspective, with Jamahal Hill, we got a long southpaw, primarily a boxer. He likes to use that jab and then be patient, get you to come to him and then pull counter with the check hook or that straight left hand. Has big knockout power. We've seen him put people's lights out, but I think his power is a little bit inflated. He, was able to get the TKO over Thiago Santos, but that was more of a Santos getting tired thing. He did knock out Jimmy Crute and and Johnny Walker, but those guys I don't think have the greatest chins, to be honest with you, and he's gotten a decision with some other fighters like Darko Stosic, like Daquan Townsend, and things like that, so he's not always getting the finish. 4 of his victories have came by decision, so I think his power is a little bit overrated, but obviously with Glover Teixeira, we've seen him get hurt in a lot of fights, but one thing about Glover, not that many guys are putting him out. To put him out, you got to have some of the best power in the game, like an Anthony Johnson. You got to be able to catch him with ton of volume, like a Alex Gustafsson. So to expect Jamahal Hill to come out here and one-shot him, I think is a little bit asking for a lot. I don't know if that would necessarily happen. Eventually, it is possible that Glover could just get clipped and get put out, but I think for that to happen, you would need to be a huge shot, and I don't know. I think it's pretty unlikely that Jamahal Hill just knocks him out with one punch. I see some people thinking that's a likely outcome, but I just disagree with that. I think Jamahal Hill, he needs to try to take a playbook out of that Anthony Smith game plan where he's moving, using the jab, and trying to walk Glover into those pull twos, the big overhands, and using his reach and power to, make Glover want to stay on the outside. And if you can get him hesitant on the outside, that's where you can kill him and knock him out. And Glover Teixeira, his game plan is pretty simple. Jamahal Hill, we have seen him his takedown defense isn't the best, and when he gets pressured, I've noticed that if you back him up and you get him to exchange, he floats his chin way up there. The left hook is going to be there for Glover, and I think that the people that are saying that Glover can't strike with Jamahal Hill are a little bit mistaken. I do think that Glover has something for him on the feet, man. If he could just pressure, I think Hill's going to be the one trying to go forward at first and might win that first round, but once he starts to slow down a little bit and Teixeira brings that pressure and can start backing him up, I think that just the fear of the level change really opens up the hands for Teixeira, and I do think that Hill floats his chin real high, so I could see Teixeira landing some big hooks and potentially even hurting Jamahal Hill on the feet. I think the leg kicks are going to be there for Glover Teixeira too, which he utilized a lot in the Anthony Smith fight, who's I think a similar guy in terms of long, stationary kind of strikers. I think Jamahal Hill's actually a little bit maybe faster and more athletic, but I think Smith is more mobile guy, a little bit smoother mover, and Hill's a little bit easier to get into and get in on the legs and things like that. And Jamahal Hill's takedown defense leaves a lot to be desired, man. I haven't really seen him get tested against the best grapplers either, and a lot of them have been able to get him to the ground, and his get-up game is pretty good, and he's able to maintain his cardio enough. I do think he got tired in that Thiago Santos fight, but both guys were tired, and he was able to have that heart and will to get the finish in the fourth round. But with Glover Teixeira, to bank on him getting tired, I think is, it happened in his last fight in the fifth round, but that pace was incredible, and I don't think that Jamahal Hill is going to be able to escape or survive some of those situations that Ihor Prochazka was able to do if he gets put in those similar positions. But man, it's interesting because the one thing I don't like about this fight is the fact that Glover, some people see it as a positive, and it could be, but Glover has had, back-to-back training camps for this one where he was training for the fight with Ihor Prochazka. He had to peak, and it's good that it didn't happen right before the week and all that, where he wasn't didn't have to cut weight or anything, but he did have to go through a full training camp or half a training camp or however long the training camp was for him, and then restart and do another one. And I'm just hoping that, him being older, that could be an issue. You could be some injuries that came up during that camp. Could be an issue with, stopping and then restarting. Could he get back into it? But I think Glover, man, he knows this is his last opportunity. It's in Brazil. And this is a good matchup for him. He's not getting a guy that he's going to see anything crazy from. Jamahal Hill has some nice knees up the middle that he could potentially land, but obviously they do give up the chance of the takedown. His kicking game is not really that crazy. He mostly is a boxer, and Glover has definitely seen that style before, and I don't think it's going to be he has to worry about as much striking craziness as he does with Prochazka. It's going to be harder to hit Hill, and Hill's a little more technical, but it's just not as much to worry about, and I don't think he is as in big danger of getting KO'd as he was in other fights that he's had. And we've just seen Glover survive the worst, man. And I think if Jamahal Hill even hurts him and doesn't knock him out and falls him to the ground, we've seen Glover reverse, get on top. And I just feel like it's a big, big ask for Jamahal Hill. He's still young in his career. He's going to have to go over there to Brazil, and I think it's going to be a big moment for him. He's one of these guys that does get emotional sometimes. And I think that Glover Teixeira is going to kind of give him a lesson here, man. Regain the belt, kind of show that his legacy is even growing even more. And I think it'll be a huge win for Glover, and I'm going to go with Glover Teixeira to regain his belt and win the fight. I'm going to say he actually wins the fight inside the distance. I'll say he wins by third round rear naked choke. I think he's going to get him tired. He's going to stock him against the cage. I think he'll land either a big hook or some sort of big shot overhand, hurt him, get him to the ground, and submit him. So going to go with the old warhorse again with Glover Teixeira to get the win in the main event as the slight underdog by submission. And so that's my full card predictions for UFC 283. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you learned something on this card. As far as my most confident pick in my party of the week, for my most confident pick, I'm going to go with Jailton Almeida. And for the party of the week, I'm going to go with Gilbert Bird, Jessica Andrade, and Jailton Almeida parlay. Those three-team parlay there. So thanks for watching, guys. If you want to check out the Patreon, I got 2 bets there. I got a bet for Invicta, and yeah, man, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. But besides that, I'm out.